Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down in the Remnant Underground in the catacombs with my friend and colleague Chris Ferrara. Chris, how you doing?
I just got off the plane. Forgive my appearance.
Yeah, you really dressed up tonight.
I'm really glad I wore this. It's a little chilly down here in the catacombs.
We are together tonight. We should make a little programming note that we haven't given up on the Remnant Forum, by the way. We just started doing some tweaking and changing with personnel and trying to raise some money for Remnant
I'm holding
TV.
out for more money in the contract
renegotiations.
renegotiations.
Exactly. I wish you'd get over yourself. I'm so tired of that holding out business. The reason Chris is in town is because he's going to be debating Dr. Alan Keyes at the Argument of the Month tomorrow night. Yeah. Al, did you know he's in town?
Thanks for telling me.
Yeah, no, I knew you could handle this. It's not a big deal. It's not like he's an orator or something. Yeah. It's just Alan Keyes. So we're really excited about the debate. It's promising to be a big deal. We're going to have some follow-up shots, some interviews probably tomorrow night after the debate. And as a matter of fact, from the underground, we'll go out. We'll venture out of the catacombs and go check out the AOTM. It's going to be packed. But we wanted to do not really a pregame show as so much as just a discussion. I think probably most of our viewers watched the debate Sunday night between Donald Trump and Grandma Hillary Clinton. And let's just start right out, Chris. What did you think? How did you think the debate went?
Well, yeah, I'm a partisan, obviously. Not that I'm a great lover of the personality of Donald J. Trump. You all know who the man is. He himself says, I'm not a perfect person. I never pretended to be such. Right. It's more a question of supporting his positions. And so from that partisan viewpoint, I thought he basically mopped up the floor with her. He started off pretty weakly, though.
Yeah.
I thought he looked like a beaten man over this issue of his revolting conversation with Billy Bush, who, by the way, is a cousin
of W.
President Bush.
Yes, exactly. Let's talk about that first of all. Let's get that out of the way. We've seen things like this in the past. I mean, this is nothing new. You have the Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe saga. You've got presidents that have had illegitimate children. Very few of the presidents have been fine, upstanding, daily communicant Christians who really are exemplars in that, especially in their private lives. So we're not in any sense saying, gee, not a big deal that Donald Trump spewed this locker room banter that was really obscene. But I guess I'd like to ask you, I mean, did this come as a surprise to you, given who Donald Trump was and given that it was 11 years ago? Were you shocked? Did you kind of suspect that he was?
I was fully expecting something like this to come out in the remaining weeks before the election, the October surprise. It was inevitable. I was wondering what was taking him so long, because this is a guy who's on his third marriage. He's obviously, in terms of sexual morality, a total lowlife. And yet we're in the face of a paradoxical situation with this character. Strange as it is to say this, this flawed vessel is the one who carries what remains for saving this country from its descent into the abyss, which is why there's this incredible, almost hysterical opposition to Trump, this roguish character by all of the forces of darkness in the political establishment, the forces of darkness in the Hollywood establishment, the media establishment. Celebrities are against him, the globalists are against him. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, bias is built in. It's baked into the media. But never have I seen anything like this. They've reached the point of near hysteria in their opposition to this guy. And I ask myself, why? It can't be because he's a man of sterling character, the Christian statesman we've been longing for. But it does mean at least this much. They believe him when he says that he's going to do the things he promises to do, especially in the area of the pro-life movement. And they're terrified of that because he has a populist appeal. Unlike the white-bread Republicans who preceded him, he's a rough and ready, roguish character who inspires a kind of loyalty. Like all presidential candidates, he's something of a demagogue, but he's, in his own twisted way, kind of a likable demagogue.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves saying, we have to get behind his candidacy, not because we admire the man, although there is much to admire in what he's done with his business. And also, as even Hillary admitted, during the debate last night, his children are admirable, which I find remarkable, by the way. It's someone who's gone through 3 marriages, public affairs, divorces, producing 3 kids who are not drug abusers, who have managed to put their lives together. So, that much about him is admirable. But there are other things that are obviously less than admirable. Well, why we support him? Because of his positions.
And what do we really know? I mean, not to defend him too much, but we really don't know if Donald Trump is going through some sort of an evolution. He's evolving into a better man. He certainly is getting a lot older. And when you look at his children and how well-spoken they are, one of his, Donald Jr. has 5 children, and really is a good spokesman and seems to have a lot of good values, important values. How does a lowlife accomplish this? I mean, I understand he's been marinated in the whole sort of casino world, the big tycoon New York guy, and this is a dangerous world for anybody, first of all. But we don't really know, has there been a Donald Trump? Has there been some sort of a transition when even Dr. Dobson said, since those 11-year-old comments happened, he's now become a more serious Christian. He's become pro-life. He's no longer a Democrat. He's a Republican. You can say, well, that's just politics. He's just faking it all. But how do we know? We don't know. Well, there might not be a slight move.
The tape on the bus is the speech of an overgrown adolescent. This is a guy steeped in wealth. He can get anything he wants. He's a TV star at that time. He was a Democrat at that time. And he obviously has issues of what the psychiatrists would call psychosexual maturity.
Right.
He's an immature man at the age of 59.
Right.
Maybe now at 70, he's growing up. But it doesn't really matter whether we prove to anyone's satisfaction that Trump is undergoing some kind of metamorphosis into a Christian. Again, it doesn't. The paradox here is that in the American political framework, the one who rises to the top is the most successful demagogue. Now, this particular demagogue, and I think he's a demagogue in a more benign sense, is making promises no Republican candidate has ever made before respecting the pro-life issue, nominations to the Supreme Court, the trade issue, and other populist elements of his program that really the establishment Republicans are shunning. And he can do without their support. He's made it quite clear that I don't need their support. This is a grassroots movement.
Well,
and indeed it is.
It is, and you saw that right after the debate on Sunday night when the insufferable Megyn Kelly, after the debate, Megyn Kelly on Fox News played the sex tape 3 more times, just because Donald Trump had done quite well by many people's estimation. So she played it 3 more times to really drive home and put it in people's memory. So you see Donald Trump, and again, I don't defend these statements at all. But you do see a very interesting, a fascinating dynamic at work here where he is opposing the entire establishment. Even Fox News. Fox News basically savaged him after that debate, with the exception of Giuliani and Hannity and some of those guys. Yeah. But most of them savaged him. So you see Trump going after them, going after the GOP, going after the GOP establishment, going after the far left as well, and Hillary Clinton and company. We've never really seen anything like this, Chris. I mean, he's saying he even brought George Soros in to that debate, talking about the evil that's coming along with this leftist brigade that's getting ready to take over America. That's a pretty interesting thing. I don't think we've ever seen it before.
Well, a couple of thoughts triggered by what you just said, the Soros connection. It seems to me that the hysteria, the confluence of forces that have reached the point of hysteria against Trump is a reflection of the fact that for the first time we really do have an outsider running for the presidency. How many candidates have we heard claim, I am not a member of that establishment, I am an outsider, I will bring change? Yeah, we've heard it all before. But this is different. And this is a guy who's made his wealth in real estate. He hasn't done it through connections with the globalist oligarchy. And he truly is an outsider. But that in itself would not explain the opposition to this man. He's an outsider who's made promises, specific promises, particularly in the area of the pro-life issue and Supreme Court appointments, that have the establishment terrified. Now, turning to Megyn Kelly, I mean, this is a lady, and if you're watching, Megyn, get over yourself, really.
And I'm sure she is. I think she watches the Underground.
You never know.
You never know.
She might stumble across our humble website. But here's the thing about Megyn Kelly. She was also focusing on the Machado incident, the Miss Universe, who claims, boo-hoo-hoo, that she felt insulted because Donald Trump made fun of her weight more than 20 years ago. And so here's Megyn Kelly during one of her segments going on and on about how important it is to women these days that their body image be respected.
So much for feminism.
Yeah, so much for feminism. So I'm saying to myself, so Megyn, you're telling me that women are going to vote against Donald Trump because he offended their sense of body image? That is a very caricature of womanhood that the feminist movement was supposed to have banished from our minds.
Yes.
The woman who thinks with her emotions, who thinks that not with her heart, not with her head, who is basically irrational because she's a woman. And there's Megyn Kelly acting irrationally because she's a woman, complaining about the issue of body image. This election's not about body image. And by the way, concerning Machado, this is something Kelly didn't point out, but CNN did an article on this controversy with Miss Universe back in the 1990s. And one of their key reporters said, and making fun of Machado, that Miss Universe had become as big as the universe by gaining 60 pounds. And the same article quotes Trump as defending Machado. Trump says in the article, well, she's one of these people who eats a lot under pressure, like I do. So he was saying that she was no different from him in terms of basically eating compulsively under pressure, and she was under a lot of pressure. It's the universe. I find it odd that Megyn Kelly didn't mention this, but you said something interesting in what we call the pre-show discussion about how maybe Kelly is thinking she's got to stay on Hillary's good side, because if Hillary wins this thing, she's going to want access and maybe she'll even want a position in the administration.
Hillary complimented her as one of America's great journalists, and I think Kelly's counting on that.
Yeah, well, the fix is in.
But again, that speaking to the hypocrisy, I think it was October 2nd, very recently, that the New York Times ran an article about the fact that Hillary Clinton had covered for her husband, made all the 4 or 5 women sort of disappear, discredited them, and all this thing that the feminists are always complaining that men do. So that's how recent, even the New York Times is pointing this out. So I think it's important for us to talk about in the fact that we're defending a vote for Trump, even if we're not defending Trump the man, to point out that what we're talking about here with respect to the sex tape is the hypocrisy. That CNN and Hillary Clinton, these people who have been all for the last 2 years trying to get men in America to be able to use the little girls' rooms and showers all over the place, that now they're suddenly terrified and scandalized and just shocked by the fact that Donald Trump said some bad things. We're not defending those things that Donald Trump said, but we're talking about this as one of the cogs in the wheel of the Clinton machine to destroy this guy. And what they're really trying to destroy is what he represents, which is disenfranchised, angry Americans who are sick and tired of being lied to by the far left.
Well, they're shocked about talk of degeneracy and the degenerate culture that they themselves have been instrumental in creating. So that's where the hypocrisy comes in. So why do we support this participant in the degenerate culture? And the answer is clear. Catholic teaching makes this clear. I discussed it during the debate, or will discuss it during the debate, depending on when the show airs. And the teaching of the church is this: when you are part of a democracy, as a Catholic, you have a moral obligation to vote. And one of the situations in which the moral obligation arises is when an evil candidate is opposed by a candidate who threatens far less harm to the common good. You cannot abstain from the election without sin in those circumstances. You have a duty to exercise your right to vote, to mitigate, lessen the harm to the common good. You can argue about whether it's venially sinful to sit out the election or mortally sinful. Moral theologians go both ways on that question. But there's no doubt that in this election scenario, Trump represents a drastic lessening of potential harm to the common good. It's a no-brainer. The abortion issue alone is dispositive. Mm-hmm. That is the paramount issue. And Mr. Keyes' position, and the position of the never-Trumpers in general, is basically sit out the election to pox on both of their houses. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because sitting out the election is basically to consent to the election of Hillary Clinton. And that means one thing and one thing only. Innocent people in countless numbers will die in their mother's wombs that would not have died before. It is that simple. There's no way around that fact. There's no way around the argument that given that fact, we cannot abstain from this election. As the moral theologians state, and I've got 2 texts in mind that I'm thinking of, you must exercise the right to vote, even for an imperfect candidate, if one who is unspeakably more evil would otherwise be elected. You have to basically block the election of the more evil candidate. And this is not choosing the lesser of 2 evils. You're not choosing the evil represented by either candidate. You're simply mitigating the degree of harm that can be done in terms of evil to the common good by preventing the election of the far worse candidate in moral terms.
Take that a step further, Chris, so it can help people to understand. Let's say that we had a pro-choice, pro-abortion candidate running against another pro-abortion candidate. One, however, thinks that partial birth abortion is wrong. What do we do in that situation? Do we abstain in that case, where you have 2 candidates that are both very much pro-abortion, but one doesn't want quite as many?
Well, as you reduce the differences between the candidates, the moral question becomes more difficult to decide. And this is a problem in all of moral theology. Moral theological questions, when you get beyond the basic precepts of the natural law, turn on the particular facts of a situation. That doesn't mean situation ethics. There is a right and wrong in every case. The question is, how do we apply the principle of right and wrong in a case where the facts make it difficult to see where the right and wrong is?
Right.
Now, this is not to be confused with situations such as the divorced and remarried who demand communion. Divorce and remarriage is adultery. There are no facts that change that. Mm-hmm. But in this case, when the differences between candidates on the pro-life issue become vanishingly small, then you might have an argument for, a greater argument at least, for abstention. But in this case, we have a candidate, Mr. Trump, who will uphold the federal ban on the funding of abortions, both here and abroad, under the Hyde Amendment, under the Hyde Amendment and the Mexico City policy. The federal government is prohibited from funding abortions here or abroad. So he's going to uphold both of those policies. He's going to defund Planned Parenthood, as long as it's involved in abortions. He's promised to appoint to the bench Supreme Court justices on the model of Justice Scalia.
Right.
Now, turning to the Supreme Court, that's where all the mischief has been done. The incalculable evil has been committed on this court, which imposed upon our nation Roe versus Wade and upheld it, although barely so, in Casey versus Planned Parenthood. If we see 2 or 3 vacancies on the Supreme Court beyond the one created by Scalia, you're talking about upwards of 4 justices that Trump would be appointing.
I want to get into
Senate confirmation.
Yep, I want to get into the practical application of that in a second. But before we go to that, remind me to ask you to revisit that. I want to talk about this idea that we hear a lot of this, that Trump is just offering pro-life lip service. But I remind our viewers to go back and remember what it was like during the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton scandal. And one of the main concerns that people rightfully had was that the president of the United States was saying things that were so obscene and so grotesque that children everywhere, by the millions, were going to be scandalized and their innocence was going to be harmed and compromised because the president is just that powerful. So even if Donald Trump doesn't really even know what it means to be pro-life, what do you make of the fact that sitting talking to Chris Matthews on MSNBC, he says, I am pro-life many times, and he doesn't articulate his position all that well. But if we're going to blame, and I think rightfully so, a guy like President Clinton for doing what he did and saying what he said, don't we also turn to a politician like Trump and say there's great value in this, even if it's just lip service?
Well, it's keeping the issue alive, if nothing else. He's a placeholder for the issue. But more than that, though, Mike, he has made specific commitments. No Republican nominee, no Republican candidate for president has ever made with respect to the pro-life issue. He's given us a list of 20 potential Supreme Court justices. If you look at the social issue cases on abortion, on gay marriage, on the decriminalization of sodomy, every one of those Supreme Court decisions was decided 5-4.
Right.
If we had had even somebody as wretched as John McCain instead of Obama, you would not have had Kagan and Sotomayor on the court. You would have had more reliably conservative justices. And those 5-4 decisions, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, would have gone the other way. And the judicial landscape of America would be radically different from what it is today. Even if somebody is mediocre in terms of conservatism, as McCain had been elected. I took a lot of flack for saying we need to vote for McCain because Obama is going to give us, among other things, ultra-liberal Supreme Court justices. Well, those who gave me flack, what do they say today after 8 years of Obama? How can they possibly argue that McCain, even in terms of Supreme Court appointments, would have made absolutely no significant difference?
Right. They can't make
the moral fabric of this country.
They can't make that claim, and basically they say this, and I understand this to some extent. I'm tired of being hogtied by the Supreme Court justice argument. Look at what happened.
You have to be hogtied by it.
I think you do.
It's a pivotal issue.
It absolutely is, but I want you to comment on something else, and that is the sort of, I don't know what you would call this, the trickle down. It's not just the executive office. What happens when you have a guy who's at least saying that he's pro-life at the level of the presidency? Now, you're a lawyer, and you're out there in the trenches all the time defending people, defending pro-lifers, pro-family groups that are getting in trouble with the police or whatever. Isn't there an effect? I mean, if you have, even if the president himself is a little weak on this, you have a nation and you have judges and you have a trickle-down effect which affects everyone, especially at the street level, somebody like you fighting the pro-life trenches.
It's more than a trickle-down effect. It's a direct action by the president, because not only will the next president be appointing Supreme Court justices to fill the vacancies that are undoubtedly coming up in the next 4 years, he will also be appointing judges to the federal bench.
Right.
And the federal bench is down in the trenches where I operate, and other lawyers involved in social issue cases, particularly pro-life cases, operate. We have to deal with judges on the bench. And let me tell you something. Today's federal practice is judge-oriented. Very few cases reach juries these days. A lot of cases are decided entirely by judges on what they call motions for summary judgment. A motion for summary judgment is basically, in a pro-life case or any other case, a motion by in my case, big abortion, saying to the judge, there's really no issue here for trial based on the discovery we've taken, the depositions and so forth. So dismiss this case before it gets to trial. And we have to deal with a federal judge at that point. And if the judge is biased in favor of the pro-aborts, if he is an instrument of big abortion, those motions for summary judgment are going to be lost, and pro-life rights will be extinguished before people ever get to juries.
Started, exactly.
And this is going to have a huge effect. There's going to be dozens of appointments to the federal bench, which will change the character of the federal judiciary at large, not just the Supreme Court.
I think that could be the most important point. I hope you bring it up with Dr. Keyes tomorrow night during the debate. It's not just the federal, it's not just SCOTUS, it's not just the executive office. It goes all the way down. I would argue it goes all the way down to the beautiful people, and I know you know a lot of them, I know a lot of them, who are out there on Saturday mornings protesting Planned Parenthood. If they get stabbed in the back again, if you end up with Hillary Clinton in charge and the whole pro-life movement just seems to be such an uphill battle, huge boulder that we're pushing up, I think a lot of them are going to give up. Let's face it, the reason Donald Trump is so popular with grassroots folks is because he gives them something to believe in again. We can get back into this fight. You get Hillary Clinton in there, and again, trickle down, I think people even at the level of protesting Planned Parenthood are going to find it hard to get out of bed on a Saturday morning if this horrible woman gets in. It's another reason to vote for this guy despite all of his negatives.
Well, any kind of reasonably aggressive but entirely peaceful demonstrations against abortion clinics have been federally criminalized under the Freedom of Access to Clinics Entrances Act. If you stand in front of the doorway of an abortion clinic for a couple of minutes without chaining yourself to the door, you're just blocking the entryway so that someone has to walk around you, you'll be charged with a violation of FACE. You're looking at the very least fines and possibly even federal prison time. But there's another aspect of Trump that has the establishment terrified. And this is very curious. I'm amazed at this aspect of his campaign. He's discovered the Johnson Amendment.
Right.
He says that the Johnson Amendment, which requires that 501c3 charitable corporations, such as churches and other religious organizations, be silent on political issues, particularly in election campaigns, or else lose their tax exemption. He recognizes that Johnson Amendment, which he pushed through, President Johnson pushed through because some Baptist preacher in Texas was making his life miserable. That amendment has, as Trump put it, stifled the voice of religion in America. Yeah. Now the establishment can see what would happen if the Johnson Amendment were repealed. Churches could take positions on presidential elections. Pastors could tell people from the pulpit, you must vote for candidate X. You must not vote for candidate Y. That in itself is something that has driven the media, political, financial, globalist establishment into a frenzy because religion is gagged in this country. Trump says it. And he also says, I will defend your rights as Christians like you have never seen before. He's vowing that. You can say I don't believe the man. And if that's Mr. Keyes' position, well, that's an argument from personal incredulity.
Let's find
out. I don't believe it. It's all lies. Well, fine. I do believe it. I take the man at his word. And I think there will be tremendous pressure on Trump to honor his commitments.
What do you think about one of the knocks against Trump is that he's arrogant. He's a prideful guy. But doesn't that almost work in our...
You have to be arrogant to run for president.
Where he is, first of all. And I think it works in our favor because I don't think Trump is going to be the type of guy who's comfortable with millions of people saying, you lied to us, you promised, and you broke your promise, and you can't do it. I think he's going to build the wall. He's going to do something because he can't. I think he is going to defend the pro-life movement and the good guys, the conservatives, because he can't live with, first of all, he can't live with the criticism that he couldn't make good on his promises, and secondly, because he wants to get reelected.
He's going to build a wall and he's going to put the Trump logo on it.
Probably. So for the next 4 years, if Trump wins, he's trying to keep you guys happy, pro-life lawyers. He's trying to keep me happy, Catholic newspaper guys, everybody. In order to get reelected, he has to keep us happy. Who does Hillary Clinton have to keep happy for the next 4 years if she's going to get...
The donors to a corrupt foundation and the oligarchs who support her.
And Planned Parenthood, you know, and the rest. So, I mean, say something about... I mean, in other words, people need to sort of see the nuance here. There's a huge difference between saying there's a practical, positive effect from voting for this guy and what he represents, mostly a resistance movement in this country, and saying, we think Donald Trump is a saint. I love him. He's the holiest man. He reads the Bible. He's God's champion. That's not the way things work. That's not what he is. But God has used similar personalities and characters in the past who are deeply flawed to do good work.
Pope Leo XIII, one of the great anti-liberal popes of the 19th century, seeing what had happened throughout the Western world, the wave of democratic revolutions, the destruction of Catholic monarchies, basically the end of Christendom, wrote an encyclical calling upon the French people to rally to the Third Republic and recognize its legitimacy, because the time for counter-revolution had passed. And he said in this encyclical, look, these are the facts on the ground. We now live in the age of democratic revolution. We have to work within the framework of what he called cankered liberties, the corrupt liberties of the modern state system, and make use of them, he said, honestly, but nevertheless make use of them, with the ultimate aim of bringing back all of society to the form and pattern of Christianity. But we have to do that within the democratic framework. That means you're voting for demagogues.
Right.
They're all demagogues. Demagogues of the left, demagogues of the right. They're all flawed characters. They're all post-Catholic and in most cases decidedly post-Christian men. Nevertheless, in a democracy, we have to work within the framework and exercise our right to vote as a moral duty. One of the things that St. Augustine said about citizens in the Roman Empire who were Christians is, essentially, if you read the Confessions and some of his letters and his commentaries on the Psalms, the theme is there. Look, we are the best citizens of this empire. Mm-hmm. We won't commit sins. We won't worship the false gods of the Romans. But if you tell us to march in your armies, we will. Yeah. We'll collect your taxes. And we'll do the other things that are required of us as a matter of civic duty. That's what we have to do in this election. Mm-hmm. Whether we like Trump as a person or not, whether we recognize his moral failings or not, this is the hand that has been dealt to us. We have to play that hand.
And I guess I'm just not that interested in a religion that would tell its people, you need to sit this out and just see what happens to you like a pinball. I mean, the Catholic Church has never suggested that. Make the best of the situation. Mitigate the damage that can be done.
People will die if we sit this election out.
Yeah.
Innocent children in the womb will undoubtedly die in far greater numbers if you sit the election out. And to Mr. Shea and all the other rather boobish members of this Never Trump constituency who think themselves so sophisticated when actually their position is moronic, have not even considered the fundamental fact this is a question of saving human lives. Apparently they don't care about human lives.
I want to clarify that just a little bit, because there are some Never Trumpers who I think are much more reasonable, and they're looking at Donald Trump and they're saying, no, I just can't do it. I'm living in a state that it doesn't matter anyway. I can't vote for this guy. And then you have the Mark Shays who are saying, vote for Hillary, apparently. That's his
he definitely said he would vote for Hillary if he were in a swing state where his vote for Hillary would make a difference. This is maniacal. These people have become so idiosyncratic in their desire to be the more nuanced than thou type of Catholic that they've ceased to be Catholic, politically speaking. This is not what a Catholic does in a situation like this. Catholic does one thing and one thing only. He votes to mitigate harm to the common good. In the democratic system, that means voting for the candidate that threatens less harm to the common good.
No, that's exactly right. I'm getting a sign from Rob over here that we need to wrap this up. Although this is fun, we should go another episode. But I wanted to close on a point of irony that I hope doesn't come off too much as told you so. But it is interesting that at the level of the presidential debates now, the position on the Iraq invasion, back in the early 2000s, that has now become a hot potato. And all I can think is, guess who actually was opposed to the Iraq war?
No. Well, maybe we should go into extended play here. I mean, this is just too delectable to pass up. Yeah, you lost something like 1,000 subscribers for opposing the Iraq war before it even got started. Yeah. I wrote an article called "Snow Day in Baghdad."
I remember that one. Yeah, that's great.
About how our predictions about the Iraq war had turned out to be correct. There were no weapons of mass destruction. The whole infrastructure of the country has been destroyed. The whole region has been destabilized. You lost 900 people. They all came back in trickles. Yeah. And now you see the presidential candidates vying for who was more against the Iraq war at the time.
It's really funny. It's really
too
funny.
Too good.
Yeah, it's too rich. So the tradies, you know what? We get a lot of flack for being too strict and too opinionated and idealistic. But I mean, we're looking at Donald Trump. We're not taking what would be a caricature of our position. Oh, the traditionalist, he's been divorced twice. There's no way we will ever touch such a soiled man. Traditionalists are much more practical, and the reason for that is because traditionalists are Catholic and Mother Church is practical. And she deals with a situation, and she shows her children how to deal with a bad situation and with good situations.
Yeah, when you vote for Trump, you're not voting for divorce. You're voting for a set of positions to which he's committed himself. And by the way, we failed to mention his vice presidential candidate.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's a good
Pence
choice.
is about as pro-life as they get on the American scene. And Pence has said that if we're elected, Roe versus Wade will end up on the ash heap of history. And it very well might.
No, exactly.
If you get that fifth vote against Roe, which we almost had in Casey, until Kennedy flip-flopped, then it will end up in the ash heap of history.
And imagine the impact when the vice presidential nominee just says that. And we know in Pence's case he means it. He says it with passion. And you have millions and millions of people who have come up through the public school indoctrination system. They never even heard that there's serious opposition to Roe v. Wade. They wouldn't even know what it means. A woman's right to choose is sacred. So here's this man reminding not only the United States, but the entire world that something's deeply flawed in this country. And of course, Roe v. Wade is at the heart of it. That's where I say, even if it were lip service, which in his case it's not, but even if it were, it's powerful, powerful lip service that this country benefits from.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we need a rerun of Casey versus Planned Parenthood. Well, this time it's 5-4 to overrule Roe versus Wade instead of 5-4 to salvage it.
Okay, now I need to.
That's a real prospect.
If
Trump gets elected.
Absolutely. So we got to give this a try. And then there is an interesting thing that he's been saying to the African American community. What the hell do you have to lose? And I'm kind of at that point right now. What do we have to lose from seeing what Trump can do? Maybe he'll make good on half of these promises, and we're going to be a lot better off.
I think you're right.
All right, prediction. How are you going to do in the debate against Dr. Keyes?
Well, it's not how I will do it. It's how common sense will fare. I mean, that's why traditionalists were always right. We're always right, not because of any merit on our part. We're just advancing the obvious. We're stating the obvious and defending common sense. It's common sense in this election that you can't sit it out and allow the babies to die. It's that simple.
Right. Good luck, my friend. Welcome down to the catacomb. Good to have you.
Okay.
We'll see you again. All right. All right, for Chris Ferrara, Michael Matt, and Rob, who's here getting impatient with us, going too long tonight, Michael Matt for the Remnant Underground. We will see you and be back on schedule next week. As I say, I think, Rob, we're going to probably do a little something at the Argument of the Month with Chris Ferrara and Dr. Keyes, so maybe we'll have a show later on in the week. But thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you then.